Okay, hello everybody. George Webb. Return to patient zero. Remember Seattle patient zero? Remember Snohomish County man? Remember he supposedly came to Seattle from China, right, in mid-January? That was the official story. That was the first patient zero. We said no. Our Potomac group in March 2020 said no. The returnees from the Wuhan summer games, summer in October in Wuhan, were the original patients, the original patient zeros. Well, we were right yesterday. The new story out now that 7 patients, a Senate report. So this has been confirmed now. And now we're looking to see exactly who those 7 soldiers were. But the Chinese were right? And we also said that they were inoculated. They were vaccinated, right, with the nanoferritin vaccine from Fort Belvoir. We'll see if that all turns out to be confirmed as well. But the key here is the story they told you about Snohomish County man coming in through these hallways, right? The story they told you, maybe they're looking for him now, it was a lie. January, they're looking for him. I think it's easier to find Bigfoot than the Snohomish County man. But remember how everyone was ready to go with tests? Matt Pottinger, his brother Paul Pottinger here at UW. Remember the 2 monoclonal antibody companies that were ready to go? Remember the nanoparticle backbone company that was here? Remember how Inovio and Bob Malone and Stanley Plotkin were ready to go? Remember the Scottish lady that went on to 60 Minutes and said, we did the sequence and we're ready with the vaccine. Remember her? Remember all the things that were lined up, ready to go? Remember Bob Malone publishing a book for Valentine's Day saying he had the fix, right, was famotidine plus remdesivir in the early trials with the domain trials. All that was set up, all that was rehearsed. All of those, the data came from Wuhan in October 2019. We know that now from the seven patient zeros, right? We don't know the exact identity yet, but we know who got all the bids. We know they forced mRNA and something called DARPA Adept. That's something else we reported on. We were right on that. We're going to be right on patient zero as well. Reporting from Seattle, Washington, George Webb. There is no Snohomish County man here in January. It'd be easier to find Bigfoot. Where you're going to find the original patient zeros is where we said October 2019, the Wuhan military games.
Hello, welcome to Neighborhood News. George Webb investigates.
Hey, George.
Hey, Tara. You were there. You were there on the Potomac when we said it was the people in October from the Wuhan games, and now the Senate report proves us right.
You know, I have to say I was there, and the amount of stuff that has happened in between now and then, that was such a great summary. I meant, just tying it all together like that. That's just a lot of your work. Just, all of a sudden it comes together. You got to give it the time, but everything eventually catches up. And I do remember you being, pointed out as calling out these people from the games, those bananas, as we called them at the time. And, we have to, for me personally, it's been like, we have to tend to feeling like putting down our roots. But I meant really the people that tried to take us out in this way need to be named out, need to be called out in very precise ways. And sometimes if we have to use code, whatever, George basically in that summary is putting it out exactly the way it is.
Well, it's always nice to have an eyewitness, and you not only were an eyewitness, but you were an incredible researcher along with 11 other people. People don't believe that we had somebody from the White House press briefing room, but you know who I'm talking about, who was from a Japanese TV, who had all the data about the Chinese reporting in February of 2020. So we were just reporting from the White House.
He's a very good source. He's a good friend of mine, and we couldn't have planned it any better. It's just like the heavens have a way of placing us in these positions, and that's one of the things of, if you hear the calling, you gotta obviously gauge things, but when it's a go, when the heavens give you a go, you land right in the perfect place, even if there's challenges. We're going to try to avoid that, but
Well,
Well,
go ahead.
Mike Lenz,
Go ahead,
Mike
Aaron.
Lenz here is catching up, and I mean, it's so wild that we were on this 4 years, 5 years ago, more, 3.5 years ago, and now everybody's interested. It's like, oh, now you guys all want to talk about it. It's just
5
amazing,
years.
but it's
5 years ago. 5 years ago.
better than 50 years.
Yeah,
So
that's very true. Very
better than
true.
50 years. But yeah,
Yeah.
good thing everybody's catching up here. So yeah, I guess, and you're in Seattle, because that's certainly where so much of the story comes together with Patient Zero, Snohomish County man. And I mean, there's so much backstory in Seattle. We'd be here all day. I think we probably only have about an hour, but
Well,
we'd be here all day to talk about all the Seattle backstory. But we'll get into some of the companies. Acaso Vax is one of the companies. Inovio, Bob Malone's baby, Inovio, was playing around out there too. And do you want to dive into those first, George, before we?
Sure.
You wanna
Sure.
do-
Tara was a part of the animated feature we created to Raiders of the Lost Ark, using Scott Adams' software, and she even did a promo for that. When Hub, you did it with Dave, but it was showing the animated feature of Heinz Feldman flying back all the stuff from the Canadian labs back and forth to Wuhan in 2017, 2018. Yeah, there's Heinz Feldman. And with Jens Kuhn, we'd also called out Jens Kuhn as a NATO go-between and runner in this preamble, the setup before the live exercise. Of course, we had Crimson Contagion in the summer, if you remember. That was in 12 different states, mainly run through the VA, getting us ready. And then we had the bids coming out with Welcome Trust in 2019, Virginia Benassi getting those, and then again, the WHO getting those for something called DARPA Adept. We didn't even know what it was. It turned out to be mRNA vaccines. So, but if you remember, the 7 folks come back here. We think it's the soccer team. The soccer team trained over here in Bothell. We think most of the 7 people that were sick trained in Bothell. They were examined at the Navy base over there in Bothell. And from the sickness and from the serum, they can extract the DNA of the virus. And from the DNA virus, you can then do the antisense, the opposite, the complementary. There's the group. You could do the complementary strand that makes up the test strips. So you may remember Paul Pottinger. Remember, Matt Pottinger is the one who sponsored the huge potluck where everyone was sloshing and eating together in the middle of January. But you can then, Paul Pottinger had the first test, right? Here's Paul Pottinger. Remember, they were at Institute of Protein Design, which was one of these ones that had a nanoparticle backbone, and you would decorate it like Christmas tree. You decorate it with the corona spikes. Institute for Protein Design. He was Paul Pottinger. And then remember, Yen Pottinger, his wife, also had an early test that Deborah Birx used in order to create the mass formation psychosis, if you remember that one. So there's the Institute for Protein Design. And one was a soccer ball, like an icosahedron, and they put the little decorations of the corona spike on that. That was Icosavax. And then, of course, Bob Malone and Inovio 4800 it was called, did a deal with UTMB, Sidley Vaccines Institute, Cynthia, our great researcher in Indiana. I'm sorry, I'm going so fast there, but
That's all right.
This is a great recap because
yeah, the 4800. Yeah, this is all Seattle. So they came out with one, and then which I think was kind of like came from Fort Belvoir, the nanoferritin vaccine. And then remember the monoclonal antibody people got a jump on everybody else. About a 90-day jump. They buried the real soccer players coming back being sick here, buried it for 90 days and came up with this kind of, Bigfoot type person who didn't exist, the, Snohomish County man. But also when you get that genetic sequence, you can also do a monoclonal antibody for the binding area, the regional binding area of the virus. And that was done by Abcelera. You could pull the serum, blood serum out of the 6 soccer players, right? Copy and, splice out the part of their genome that makes the spike, put it into a rat called a hybridoma, and then put it into a petri dish, and now you can start making monoclonal antibodies. So Absalera was also absolutely one of the early people who benefited, and it was all an insider's game. Unfortunately, all of those failed. Icosavax failed miserably. It just hung around. All the ornaments fell off the Christmas tree. Basically, it was just a Christmas tree running around in your veins. Inovio failed miserably. Absalera was successful. But all of these people took advantage of having that genetic sequence 90 days in advance from the soccer players. We're just finding that out today. We're finding out how right our reporting was and how they had the inside track, and they blew it anyway.
Here, I'll read from Icosavax's release of why they said that their COVID-19 vaccine failed. Icosavax has just wrapped up an investigation into the disappointing results of its COVID-19 vaccine candidate IVX411, finding that instability issues were at fault. The receptor binding domain of the soccer ball shaped virus-like particle degraded at the recommended storage temps of 2 to 8 degrees or 2 to negative 8 degrees Celsius. The instability proved to diminish the effect of the vaccine in mice studies. So that's from Icosavax. But yeah, a lot of losers in the race. We all knew about
Inovio because their stock was like through the roof, and then as soon as their thing failed, that was Stanley Plotkin. Remember, Stanley Plotkin did all the polio vaccines, and he did all the Congo, Crimea, hemorrhagic fever all over Africa, right? And he did prisoners. He did women that didn't know that they were getting the vaccine. He took people who were day wage slave labor. He just took advantage of everybody wearing shoes in Africa for the polio and the other vaccines. And then he was the insider that they wouldn't name at Inovio. So Bob Malone and his wife started the company. But yeah, go to Inovio and look at how their vaccine turned out. Inovio 4800.
Here's Inovio shares wilt as COVID-19 vaccine runs into FDA hold. And, I think the whole thing was a school play. I don't believe any of this actually had to do with any scientific tests that were being done. I think it was all just favors and, whatever was planned in the pipeline ahead of time, in my opinion. But,
yeah, I mean, I guess it was going to be mRNA, DARPA Adept. That was going to be the thing that got pushed. And maybe it was good to have a couple of blind dogs in the race, so it looks like a race.
Yeah. I didn't laugh. A blind dog is very sad, of course, yes. But I mean, blind dogs, I get it. I've never heard that expression. But yeah, that's kind of what it was.
I hate to say it that way.
Yeah, that's kind of what it was, though. Exactly.
That's true.
So one topic actually I'd like to dive in on before we get lost and we forget and I think people can find this, an easier onboarding point, is the Pottinger family. There's so much here. People have done series on the Pottingers, and the father, Stanley Pottinger, is a staple in Washington D.C. deep state circles. Stanley Pottinger, and it's like, man, he really got his sons involved. He got his sons involved in very important positions around the world. Did he die? Stan Pottinger died in 2024?
Yeah, Stan Pottinger died
last year. Oh my gosh, I didn't realize he died so recently. Oh, look at that.
But he was Kissinger's right-hand man when it came to anything science. I just did a film and put it out there on Rumble with, he represented all the Johns, all the targeted people in the compromise operations with Jeff Epstein. So that's the first thing. But the second thing about Stan Pottinger is he was the last Nazi virus. So he actually wrote a book for Henry Kissinger talking about if only we could come up with a virus that would kill everybody and only we had the vaccine. So that was the last Nazi virus, the book he wrote. Wow. Remember all the Nazis that came in on the submarine in Key Biscayne, Florida, with Vannevar Bush and also Prescott Bush, no relation, and then Richard Nixon was bringing them all in with B.B. Rebozo. Remember, they brought in all the Nazi scientists they were going to do the Bay of Pigs invasion. So there's a lot of history there in Florida.
Yeah.
And that's where the book is set. The last Nazi virus is set. There it is.
The last Nazi.
the last Nazi. They just left virus off, but it's all about the last Nazi virus. It's all about the last Nazi virus. And this was really, and we said this was how Avi Braverman, the super Zionists wanted to adopt the Nazi technology for the ethnic cleansing of Gaza, and also the ethnic cleansing of the interstitial settlements, Palestinian settlements. If there would be a selective virus that would be able to select between Jews and Palestinians, the only problem is they're so closely related with their background. They couldn't distinguish.
But what's fascinating, there's so much with the Pottingers. So Matthew Pottinger was involved at the State Department, right? He would have been in Trump's State Department. And General Flynn, certainly Matthew Pottinger worked at the Trump White House upon recommendation from General Flynn, which is neither here nor there, but everywhere. In certain senses, I don't know that we'll get into the reference that Mike Flynn gave for, hiring Matthew Pottinger there at the State Department. But he was obviously very involved in the China travel ban that went on early on in COVID, or did not go on, was supposed to go on, didn't happen fast enough, all the things that went on there. But Matthew Pottinger was a journalist back at the Wall Street Journal back in 2023 when SARS-CoV-1 emerged, and that, to me, when we look at
2003,
right, 20 years before,
2003.
18, I guess I use 16 years before, right? And so it's like, really, this guy, when he was younger, Stan Pottinger's other son, just happened to be the number one reporter. I mean, he was the guy who broke the story. When you go back and you read all the old, articles from 2003 from the Wall Street Journal, he was, on it, and he was the number one reporter, is this guy. And now all these years later, he's in the State Department running the whole, China withdrawal, or the China aspects of the COVID, SARS-CoV-2. And now what you're telling us is that the brother, I don't know if he's an older brother or younger brother, but the brother, Paul, is in Seattle. And I did not know this, I guess, or I missed it. Maybe I forgot. I don't know. But tell us a little more about Paul and just what he has to do with the story, because that's amazing to me that Stan Pottinger's other son is right where he needs to be to, pull this.
Right, right at the perfect time. Well, first of all, I want to say that we had Tara sing Somewhere Under the Rainbow, because we were all under the aerosolized coronavirus of Matt Pottinger. She was the Tara Stars sang Somewhere Under the Rainbow in honor, in the persona of Matt Pottinger. And then I wrote a book of that title, Somewhere Under the Rainbow. So I think everybody deserves to hear a little bit of Somewhere Under the Rainbow before we go on to Paul.
Okay, well, I'll just say that I think that you were referring to, was there a real Operation Rainbow?
Well, I don't think I think it was Dark Winter, but I like Somewhere Under the Rainbow because it's like like Under Ionized Skies. Only it was he's been aerosolizing viruses for at least 20 years, right? And that was his father's greatest ambition, was aerosolizing all these Nazi viruses that didn't aerosolize very well. So that's where I was going with Somewhere Under the Rainbow. But you sang it beautifully.
Okay, well, however I sang it at the time, I'll just say right now, I can just say, somewhere over. No, because we were not
under
over. We would like to be over, but we were under. We won't take your aerosolized crap. So just keep it away. It's like,
very well done. Keep it real. There you go.
Because you know what? I'll just tell you, this is what I think. I think that they need to come in close contact. The aerosol, it doesn't go very far. Okay. And so it's like they need to position you, with a needle or some aerosol or some, and it's one thing that we've learned is the vectors, they love their vectors. So they're going to try to go, in as many directions as they possibly can. And, so
like a rally, maybe like when they're all in the bottom of a pit.
Yeah, exactly. When, and that's why we try to keep it on our toes, but at the same time, we're going to live. We're not going to hide behind a mask. We're not going to hide, we're going to follow our guides, and but and keep a keen eye and a head on a swivel and all that stuff. But we don't want to be like once we know the game, that's it. And if we just
We're ready for it this time round. We're ready
Right.
for it, the H5N1.
We got
By the way, let me just ask Tara, how do you like the studio?
The studio looks great. I'm so excited. I was here in the fall, get back in the spring, and hopefully in this season we'll be definitely picking up the pace. But the studio looks great. It's definitely a lot of work has been done. And when I first got here, and which congratulations everybody on the election because that was awesome. When I first pulled in last time, the Trump gear.
It was Dark Maga Studios for sure back in October.
Yep. They had the guy out front with all his flags, and so I feel like, it's the golden age. So we are ready to, we're not going to forget all the stuff that we need to figure out like this stuff, but we certainly are ready to thrive, and we're definitely ready to take the foundations that we made and start building up with it.
It's morning again in America. Remember, that's what you were saying when you're here 6 months ago or whatever that was.
Yes.
It's morning again in America, everybody. So rejoice.
So we're going to Paul now. Paul Pottinger. We're switching.
Yeah, let's continue. Paul Pottinger. So
it's good to see these people's faces because we talk about them, but like looking in their eyes, you're like, yes.
So he's at the University of Washington, infectious diseases, and he was also at the CDC. Or maybe I'm confusing that with Yen. Yen was at the CDC.
Yen was at the CDC working for Deborah Birx. And Yen's the one that really, I think she's from either Vietnam or Cambodia or Thailand or one of those Southeast Asia countries. And she's the one who was working mainly with Jeremy he's now the head of the WHO, or he's the chief science officer. All of a sudden I'm forgetting Jeremy's last name. But she was the one more doing the overseas work in the foreign countries. I think she might be Vietnamese, Matt Pottinger's wife. But again, these are the people that she had the earliest HIV test. Again, they're the insiders that are getting the test before everybody else at CDC. So if you want to punch out a story about how there's a big pandemic, you're totally in control if you have the test kit. The test kit is your way of getting the answer and getting the news story that you want. If you want to say 20 million people are going to die, you just get Ira Longini to do some projections. You get Lisa Barsoomian at the CDC to have a mass formation psychosis conference call. And all of a sudden, everybody thinks 20 million people are going to die. Paul Pottinger was important in that because he was the one testing all these people coming back and around the world for coronavirus during the October, November, and December timeframe, so that Deborah Birx could come back. And remember Michael Callahan going to all the ships, to all the cruise ships and saying how deadly this was and so forth. That was all a part of this story building, right? That this was such a deadly virus and we needed to have mRNA right now.
Yeah.
And here, do you remember? I want to just before we say goodbye to
Creeps.
Yen.
Say goodbye to those
do
creeps.
you remember this, George? Do you remember what this was?
I can't look.
Yeah, in Vietnam, there was this wildlife preserve where they had taken a lot of these genetic manipulations, and they had crossed a lot of these animals. And this was a weird cross between.
This is a ferret badger.
Ferret badger. Yeah.
Remember when like the earliest days of COVID, when it was zoonotic, right? When they were telling us how it had to be zoonotic, and it was either the ferret badgers or the raccoon dogs. They were sure, right?
They said that?
Oh yeah. I mean, for weeks back in probably February, it might have been, or maybe just right in Potomac group time. But it was we were being told it was either the ferret badgers or the raccoon dogs, and the ferret badgers came from this specific Kooky Fong. Remember, we did a show called the Kooky Fong. They came from the Kooky Fong National Park, where Yen Pottinger had worked before the CDC. So it was just like, what? Yen Pottinger used to work at the park where the ferret badger, which is, the culprit of COVID, is, and
And
this
she
is
was with Jeremy. She was with Jeremy, the chief science officer. All of a sudden, Sir Jeremy, I'm forgetting Sir Jeremy's last name, but
okay.
maybe it's in the chat. But she was 4 years on the Mekong Delta
Mhm.
with Jeremy. So you just wonder, Matt Pottinger, the whole thing. It's very tight, incestuous group.
Yeah, but certainly nobody believes that it's zoonotic anymore. We never even hear that.
No,
right?
no. See, the way it is
long
those
gone.
bats. Those bats flew to Africa where the pangolin is, right? That's only a 3,000-mile flight. And then they flew back after they had carnal knowledge with each other. And then they flew back to Wuhan, but they didn't, or flew back to China, but they didn't stay home. They flew to the fish market. Then the fish grew wings that got infected and then went to 160 different countries. So that's how it happened. That's what Donnie O'Sullivan told me. And I said, no, Donnie, actually, it's a joint venture between the Fort Detrick and USAID Predict and Fauci and NIAID and Wuhan Academy of Sciences. And that actually is what turned out to be true.
Yep. Well, so before we change gears, I think that's enough on the Pottingers. Folks can certainly dive into the Pottingers. There's such a rich amount of research. Sir Jeremy Farrar, I believe Sir Jeremy Farrar was the name.
Jeremy Farrar, that's right.
But a lot of rich information on the Pottinger family, Matt, Paul, Yen, Stanley. You could dive in for hours. But before our time leaves us here,
Charles, WKRP in Cincinnati? Yes, exactly. As soon as I first came to the studio, in my mind, everyone turned into WKRP in Cincinnati.
What? I don't know if I get that joke.
I'll play it later for you.
It was before you were born, Eric, but Aaron, but it was a bunch of people that were all kind of quirky, that all ran a radio station, and they were more funny off air than they were on air, and it made it a great comedy series.
Yeah, Andy is Johnny Fever, by the way.
Yeah.
I see. So this is like a show.
And we have Wes.
It was a show. It was a comedy show.
We have Wes Nussman.
I see. Oh, I clicked it twice there.
Yeah, so we'll get back to that at some point. Thanks, Charles.
Fascinating stuff. You never know where it'll turn. But so a few just other things in Seattle. We've gotten a lot of, so you began the J6 files on your Substack.
Real J6.
J6 series. And before J6 was the Summer of Love, and people they forget, I guess, that the J6 was Trump people, at least in their mind, like this was a bunch of Trump people, whereas the Summer of Love would have been, the left doing the Summer of Love, you might say.
Mostly peaceful.
I would allege that it was the same group of Ukrainian operatives being shipped around the country to, Ukrainian and, other CAA guys, or I don't know exactly who, but before J6 was Raz and the Chaz, or Chaz and the Raz, or Chaz and the Chop. I'm going to look it up here, but do you remember Raz and the Chaz, George?
Sure. That was in Seattle, and they had the Chaz and the Chop. The Chaz and the Chop.
Right. So, I just thought, it was fascinating that you were in Seattle today and you had begun the Real J6 series. And in my mind, the Summer of Love, it really just all led up to that. And, the Chaz and the Chop were a seminal part of the 2020 George Floyd Summer of Love that just, I don't know. I wanted to make sure we mentioned those in the show today.
They wanted to do that all over. I think they wanted to do Chaz's all over.
All over the country.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, maybe.
We had actually declared our site there at the Real News Cafe. I call that the Real News Cafe. I'm coming out with a whole Real series.
Yeah.
But realnews.cafe.com.
Oh, do we lose his sound?
George.
Oh, we lost the sound a little. But
did I come back? Oh, sorry about that.
But here's Raz for folks who remember Raz. Raz was the warlord of the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, CHAZ, in Seattle, and he was the one running around with all the guns and just what a time we lived through, America. How was George
Floyd's brother, right, in Geneva the day after, right, declaring autonomous zones? And what it did was it triggered Article 5. Anytime there was an oppressed group they're allowed to call the Security Council and do Article 4, and then the Security Council votes on it to make it Article 5. But now I can stash guns. I can push guns into the Chaz, into the CHOP, all over, like Tara said, all over the United States. I can invoke Article 5 if I have just one incident, and it's a manufactured incident, as we know, right? And now I'm not saying George Floyd wasn't murdered. He was. It was horrible, but it wasn't an international, it wasn't the government, acting out, ordering this murder, like Patrice Lumumba, killing Patrice Lumumba in Congo. That was ordered by the CIA and Richard Bissell. This wasn't that. This was a wacky cop who had business with George Floyd before, selling pornography and guns and counterfeiting and all kinds of other stuff, killing one of his crime partners. But that invoked Article 5. And as Tara is saying, is all these places, Minnesota and Seattle and all these places, started to cache weapons. They were autonomous zones that didn't respond to the laws of the United States. This is why Tim Walz, I call him out, because that whole when their Minnesota burned, Minneapolis burned, they were moving the weapons in, right, during the George Floyd era. It's a trigger. It's a manufactured event so that you can now do an American Gladio.
Yep. And George, weren't they already bringing caching weapons via the ocean over there?
Yeah, I mean this has been going on for a long time. Task Force talked a lot about it. I wrote an American Gladio series for all the receipts for people who want to see it on my Substack. But yes.
And there's that garden that they just showed. They did this little they did a little teeny square of a garden, and they were like, "This is the colored people garden." You're just like, I don't know.
We didn't talk about it pre-show or anything. I just wanted to be sure we remembered that, as we go down memory lane here with Tara and talk about 2020 and all the things from the last 5 years. I mean, we don't want to forget the Summer of Love, the Chaz and the Chop, and there's so much there. There's obviously a lot of rich research there as well. But I'm going to start. I'll put some comments up. Oh, that's a close up. Sorry. I'm going to put some comments up, George. Get some comments before it's too late. Your battery. I know you're on the Wi-Fi there at a restaurant. So, we've got some clarity. But here's Lori Anderson. I don't know. Oh, maybe
Carol. Hey, Carol.
Lori Anderson was the, I think Lonnie Anderson. It was Lonnie Anderson that was the star.
Yep.
On WKRP.
Okay.
Exactly.
I think a lot of military participants in the Wuhan games shipped out of Fort Lewis and back. Patient Zero was supposedly included on one of the flights back, according to Mark K's reporting.
Okay.
Interesting. Okay.
That's true. Fort Lewis. That's where I was on 9/11, by the way.
Oh.
Yeah. So, I basically said if there was going to be a biological attack, I was there on 9/11. That's where they did come back. That's where the soccer team did come back through. And they trained over not far from that Providence Center that supposedly treated Snohomish County man. Now Fort Lewis is down by, down here by SeaTac. It's close to where I am right now, right? But that fort Bothell is to the north, and it's where where Snohomish County man was, and that Providence was the same place that also received the Ebola folks, if you remember, in 2014.
That's fascinating.
2014.
But they wanted to control it to be military. You see what I'm talking about? They wanted to have a military control.
Yep. That was a hinge year in many ways, 2014.
Wasn't that also the place that Vindman had an apartment?
Vindman was down. Yeah, Vindman was a little bit further south in Olympia. He had an apartment. Not the port of Olympia, Tacoma. He had a port of Tacoma, which is a little south of here. This is SeaTac. The Seattle is the Seattle part, and then TAC is Tacoma. Vindman had the $1 million condo in Tacoma, which I'm telling you, $1 million doesn't buy you a lot downtown Seattle, but $1 million buys you a lot in Tacoma. Just saying. They're two different places.
And that's where the Afghanistan weapons shipped out from.
Yes.
For
Fort Lewis and the logistics center at Fort Lewis, 90% of the weapons that went to the Afghanistan war shipped through that port. Yes.
Right. And before they just left them all there for the Taliban to take, freely, they were diverting them.
Yeah,
other
yeah.
places. I mean,
Helicopters, planes, Stinger missiles, everything.
absolutely.
Everything.
Cash and guys, cash cab guy. It was all fake, says Cindy. Reckoning Truth. I think she's talking about the Raz and the Chaz. I think she was referring to there, but yeah.
What, with the frozen turkeys? Oh.
Tacoma, yep. Providence Hospital in Everett is very close to the stadium where some trained. Okay, so it's the Providence Hospital.
Yeah, and that's the same place that had the Ebola breakout in 2011. And isn't it interesting? Paul Pottinger is there at that time as well to be the first person to treat the first person coming in the 2014 Ebola outbreak. So I'm just saying these are live exercises. They're simulation exercises. The group in the WHO is called SimX for simulation exercise.
Simex.
And I guess there, I also wanted to make sure we discuss some of the just historical stuff in the Seattle area, of why this was a hot spot for research for what could ultimately have been mRNA research is what we're looking at, because we know that's what came out of COVID, so that's what we've got our eye out for. But they had this fetal tissue bank. So the University of Washington had like the number one in the world repository for aborted fetal tissue, body parts and tissue and other things. And
Bill Gates and Planned Parenthood. Yeah.
And that's why it's like, I think you could go all the way back to that, probably even before. I mean, I guess that's where I'm going back to with this reference here that I'm making. But I really think, going back to the 90s, having the fetal tissue bank there in Seattle really suggests to me that Seattle was the place where the most cutting edge research and the most cutting edge researchers were laying out the plan for the new age of science, which was foisted upon us at COVID, right?
This is why Bill Gates, this is why I say the relationship between Bill Gates and Jeff Epstein, and everybody misses the vaccines. Everybody misses Haiti. Everybody misses Africa. But 2002 to 2010, they were looking for this type of solution. They tested it in Haiti as the incubator, and then they projected it to Africa. You have an African wife, you have African children. You know the story on how it works in Africa. This isn't just a 2010. Nicolek is not the first person that introduced them. They had the same science officer, Maria Starnes Walker. In 2000, she lived at Jeff Epstein's house starting in 1992. He put her through school. She was the chief science officer at the Gates Foundation. She was the chief science officer at the Jeff Epstein's foundation. Now she's the chief science officer at the WEF.
Wow.
Right? So does that show you a pattern there? Right? They were looking for solutions for Africa.
Wow.
And actually, this will be the last topic I wanted to make sure we touch on today. This connects to the story you were touching on a few days ago with the Long Island serial killer, if I'm not mistaken. Can you run us through, those connections there between these science officers and what was going on there? And
sure.
Sarah, you that was like right when you first started watching, George, or maybe slightly. You were right there, though. I know that was
what year was it?
2017.
Oh yeah, exactly.
You would have been right there, because you were a big Task Force.
Yep, exactly.
This is Task Force's biggest fan here, folks. For all
Task Force.
Angel.
Task Force had seen the stuff I did at Gilgo Beach, and she had seen the stuff I did at Oak Beach and so forth. And she was right off. She had it just as soon as I did. It was like, hey, all these girls were thrown out into this area where there's nobody, in this marshy area, and for 18 months they were decomposing out there in this burlap. This doctor had the burlap in this backyard. The doctor had a home for wayward girls in his house. The doctor admitted to drugging them. The doctor admitted to calling Shannon Gilbert the day after she disappeared. The doctor admitted to Shannon Gilbert being in her house. I mean, basically what Task Force said, and I don't want to take I don't want to say I came about the conclusion. I think we came about the conclusion simultaneously that all of the bodies were thrown in that field to decompose in the burlap for 18 months and then moved. The skeletons were moved to make it look like it didn't happen in Oak Beach. The doctor had all these cameras. The doctor destroyed all the evidence. The Suffolk County Police was actually going to the parties, bringing the sex toys. So it was obviously state sponsored. It was obviously more important than trying to get to compromise a bricklayer or compromise an auto mechanic. Look at the people that were compromised by Jeff Epstein. Look at these girls. They're all supermodels, right? They were compromising the head of Barclays Bank. They were compromising the head of these banks where people had huge budgets, or scientists. He was compromising these scientists so that he could exfiltrate all this information to Little St. James because it was in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and he could get easier patents in U.S. Virgin Islands than he could in the United States. So he took a lot of Nobel Prize winners down there. Everybody just focuses on the sex trafficking, but there was much more emphasis on the science than you think.
Right. You have to think, why are they targeting these people?
Mhm.
Right. It's not because of, they're close by. It's the head of Barclays Bank was one of them. Bruce Orr, his father had 800 patents at Oak Ridge National Laboratories for embrittlement, for the containment vessels for nuclear. All these things is what Bill Gates goes into. Bill Gates goes into the small nuclear reactors. He goes into the genetics. He goes into the CRISPR, all the things that Jeff Epstein was into and getting secrets for. Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation ended up doing, and the WEF ended up doing. So you have to ask yourself, what's the common thread, right? It's compromise.
Yep.
And Bill Gates was compromised himself by Jeff Epstein.
And so for folks who missed it, George was covering the Long Island serial killer case. I guess another individual was arrested in the last few days, which could shed light on the case and bring it back into the news. But that is on the East Coast over in New York. So kind of the opposite side of the country from where you're at. And I don't think you're getting over to New York anytime soon. So
I did my week, and I felt we cracked the case. Task Force helped me from California, but really, that was all legwork. We went to all the places everybody died and just said, it's obvious the bones have been moved after all the muscle tissues fallen off and everything, then the bones are much easier to move.
But you'll probably be moving on from that story, it looks like.
Yeah.
Moving that. So for folks who want to review that, or folks in the New York area who want to review that, it is there on George's Substack. And there's a lot of rich information there.
Can I comment on something we already talked about? Okay.
Yeah,
so last night, it's funny that you say this. I'm not sure how recent this was, but I saw another one of these like Planned Parenthood undercover videos where these two girls were admitting to, did you see that?
No.
Where these two girls were admitting to this guy that they actually he was posing as a buyer to the tissue. To the fetal tissue.
Oh, okay.
They were just talking totally off the cuff on how whatever, you know what I mean? And it's just like, you can't even believe people talking like this. And then they were even saying the buyer, whatever, and she had some 16-year-old in there helping her, and they weren't even that old anyway. So it was just.
So you're interested in the fetal?
Disgusting.
I guess
we're
not. But the fetal tissue bank.
I just saw it last night. And it was.
I can say another comment, which maybe you'd find interesting, George, just to look back on, the news of the last year or couple of years now, is Roe v. Wade was overturned, and that's just one of those things that, so much has happened in the last 5 years, right? But Roe v. Wade was overturned right after the shots were rolled out. And to me, it was kind of like, oh, okay, so Roe v. Wade was really just about fetal tissue. It really wasn't about women's rights or women's lib or anything. It was about getting fetal tissue. And once you had the mRNA shots out here and you had all these billions of people taking mRNA shots, you don't really need the fetal tissue anymore. So, give them their red meat, give them their Roe v. Wade back, and let the cities burn or whatever it's going to be. But it's like, I think it was all about needing fetal tissue for experimentation and not about women's rights.
They do want that. They still want it.
But
they'll take it if they can get it.
You don't have to comment on that, George. That's my own editorialization, I guess, on what I've seen.
I see that. I can see that. I do.
Well, Tara's a grandmother, so she has she's gone through this twice. So I'll let her talk about it.
Exactly. Well, I do think that honestly, politically speaking, that the states having control, and I meant like, are all states going to do the right thing? No, we know part of them are going to do the right thing and part of them are going to try to do the wrong thing. But I do think that a big part of their big game with promoting, all of this social engineering has gone on for so long, and they planted seeds in people where we really need to heal and be suspicious. So I do think that they are mostly doing that and that it needs to stop. But I also do trust the states in just figuring it out in a more internal way. And of course, very early termination for me personally. If whatever, the whole idea of like these people, it's the trafficking, that's why they do it. The late term stuff, it's sick. Okay, the whole thing is just sick. And whatever, anybody has an opinion, which we all should probably have a strong opinion, but I really don't think that it's a political subject, honestly, even though I do give it up to the states.
Fair enough. Here, we'll close it right there with that. We'll at least on that topic. I'll do a few more comments and then we'll send you back into the chop there, the Chaz on the chop. Providence Hospital used to be called Everett General. In 1955, I got the first polio injection there and nearly died. Wow. But I didn't die, fortunately, and I didn't get polio like my friend's sister.
Wow.
Interesting.
There's a great new book called Dispelling Illusions, something that affects Susan Humphreys, the doctor who has done an extensive look into the polio thing. And I had the general impression, all the kids went into the iron lungs because, that polio was going around in the swimming pools. And then they came up with the polio vaccine and then it all went away. And that is completely shattered by Susan Humphreys' book. Dissolving Illusions. Yeah. Where it shows, what they did was they changed the definition, just like they did with coronavirus, right? It was, if you had any health practitioner could say you had paralysis for 24 hours, they just checked the box as polio before the polio vaccine. After the polio vaccine, you had to have paralysis for over 2 months, and so the polio, just by the definitions, dropped dramatically. And so everybody attributed it to the vaccine, but actually 100 million people got the vaccine. And there was way worse side effects from the vaccine than the benefits. I think everybody agrees to that right now. So, and plus SV40 with the Cutter incident, SV40 and the SV40 promoter, not so bad just by itself. But if you have any kind of contamination, which they did, all the vaccines did, not just the Cutter labs, there were 6 different contractors, then you get the cancer. So Ed Haslam has written about this, Dr. Mary's monkey, where the monkey virus got into the polio vaccine and caused all this cancer. And it's across the board, increase in cancers, all the soft tissue cancers. So, do we want to do another vaccine with Dr. Soon Chong, another cancer vaccine? And he makes it sound like he's the only person who's got a cancer therapeutic with Activa, which is only approved for one bladder cancer. Why not get Keytruda or some other cancer drug that's more popular, and just vaccine everybody? So I feel like they're getting the PR machine wound up for the cancer vaccines right now.
Mm-hmm.
That thing you just said vaccines have helped more than anything else in medical history. That's like absolute insanity.
Well, we're just showing the graphics, referencing the books that have been shown.
Save
and
more
everything.
lives.
Here are a couple
incident,
comments, and then we'll be on our way. Former Governor Dan Evans, friends with Bill Gates' dad. Evans co-founded the Evergreen State College in the early 70s.
That's in Olympia, and that's very, very woke. That's where Brett Weinstein was from.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And he had the settlement.
That whole thing.
Yep. Here's Evergreen, yeah. And let's see. And then there's Piggy Palace across the border near Vancouver, British Columbia.
Bad news.
We're losing your internet there a little, George. I think we might have come to our hour here anyway. I guess.
They used to do it in the West Nile with mosquitoes.
Oop. Awesome update.
I don't believe in the Piggy Palace. I don't believe in the Piggy Palace. I don't believe that.
I'll have to look at
it. Well, just David, what's his face in Canada? He had
Yeah,
these
yeah.
weird conspiracy theories about Bill Clinton betting on a child snuff ring and all these
David
crazy thoughts. David, I can't remember his last name.
Hawkins, David Hawkins.
Hawkins, David Hawkins.
Yep, I remember. Yeah, because that was supposedly Piggy's Good Time Palace, blah blah blah, whatever. I mean, I don't know. I've never gone to check it out or anything. Sounds like a
I
total
think the
creep show.
RCMP. I think the RCMP was running a trust operation to try to get pedophiles, and that's what the Piggy Palace was. I don't think Bill Clinton was in any snuff child ring and betting on the night of 9/11 who was going to die in the snuff ring. I don't think that happened.
They have other people to do that, right?
You'll have to tell me more.
Right.
I
I
guess.
just saying David Hawkins was, stacking things on top of the RCMP trust operation. Yeah.
Right, but he did believe it, though.
He believed it. He believed it. Yeah. He
He
was
did.
a nutcase. He believed it, but he was kind of a nutcase.
Kate says Paul Pottinger's wife did a historical romance series on Netflix called Bridgerton in 2021. Oh, that's interesting. We'll have to look that one
Gross.
up.
Hi, Kate.
So Netflix has not been impressing anybody much lately, but
No.
not us at least. But low dose BCP to young ladies generate higher rates of AB and greater amounts of products of pregnancy for those dealers for sale on the market. I don't know if maybe I didn't read that well enough.
And I don't know enough if that's bovine cow factor or what. I don't know what the BCF is, so I can't comment.
Okay. We'll have to look that up for next time.
Well, Reckoning is saying that they were doing the polio BS on the West Nile.
Their polio BS was used to do
the
West Nile mosquitoes.
Ugh.
I think she's just talking about mass formation psychosis. They do these every once in a while, and then they say your kid will end up with microcephaly, the small shrunken heads, and then it makes the women not want to have children. So it's a birth control device.
True.
2 of the ID4 suspects attended Evergreen. I don't know what the ID4 is.
Is that the Lithuanian thing?
Look that up. And BC birth control was BC.
Birth control.
Birth control products. P probably products for.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, just tell us what the ID4 is, and we'll run it down.
Yeah. Hawkins was a tad touched. Smart guy, though.
Yeah.
He's a smart guy. He was a smart guy. But he accused me of being involved with the RCMP, with the Blackberries, and I can't remember the Blackberry company that was based up there that was, and then the CEO was murdered, and he somehow had me involved in it. And I'm like, Dave, just take a Valium, dude.
Yeah. But you met Field, though, didn't you?
Yeah, I met Field. Field, was in the air on 9/11. There's not a lot of people that can say that. And he said what he said. He said that there was a weird test that was being done that day, a weird simulation exercise again. Isn't it always interesting? All these things happen while there's a simulation exercise.
Always an exercise.
Yeah, that's why nobody responded militarily to the hijacking, is because they thought it was an exercise.
Is this Field?
No.
That's
Field McConnell was living in Plum City. That's him.
Yep, the uninterruptible. What is it called?
Autopilot. Yeah.
Uninterruptible.
SPC Corporation. That was Dov Zakheim. Yeah.
Yep.
So Field had a lot of great information. I asked him, when I visited him in Plum City, I said, how much stick time do you have in a jet? He said something like 5,000 hours.
Yep.
And I said, I'm calling you anytime I have a jet question, because that's a lot of time. A jet is so expensive to run, but maybe he was considering like commercial jets as well, because he was also a commercial jet pilot. So maybe I didn't understand that whole hourly rating, but it was some ungodly amount of hours. So he was an expert. He still is an expert in his field.
Yep, in his field. Exactly. Outstanding in his field. Yes.
Fascinating stuff. There's so much research to go through.
Oh, yeah, Boeing.
Fascinating stuff. But Idaho, the ID4 was the Idaho murders.
Oh.
That university, I think, were those folks that got killed at
Okay.
University of Idaho.
This must be recent. Yeah, that's the recent thing. And
So the suspect was at Evergreen, maybe, and then went over to Idaho. Is what?
Then they came over to Moscow. They came over to the University of Idaho. Okay, I got it. Okay,
Okay.
Bill Gates GMO mosquitoes, says Black Rabbit.
that was in Florida. I was there.
Brett Mosley says Stephen Hawkins was an op he could talk and also was an Epstein Isle attendee.
I wouldn't be surprised if that was some kind of
Field
trick.
sister was deep SES.
Yes, Christine Marcy. She was in with Hillary Clinton and all there. And what was that? The Attorney General or something there. What was her name back in the day? She was like a tall lesbian.
Oh yeah, Janet Reno.
Janet Reno. Yeah, she was in there with Janet Reno and all these Federal Bridge type stuff and all that stuff.
R.I.P. David Lester Straight. I don't know who that is.
Oh yeah, he did a lot of the what would you even call that? Like the lawfulness. I'm just gonna say land, air, and water instead of our legal mumbo jumbo that we do now.
All right, we'll have to look him up here.
I think that's who it is.
Senior Executive Services, says Charles.
And that is true. Yes, they took the top 3 grades of GS 14, 15, and 16, and those were normal grades before, and they made it this exclusive country club type thing where you can't get rid of them. And then they made it so that you can cross train, and with no training at all, you could take somebody from forestry and put them in the head of like a gun and badge agency. It made no sense at all, but it was so that they could control the club that was running the government.
Right.
Christine Marcy was Field's sister.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right.
I wonder where she is these days.
That wouldn't be a fun family reunion to attend, you know.
Definitely not.
ID4 with the co-eds definitely appears to be a compromise situation with co-eds and all the associated red lines that George speaks of in conflict areas.
I went to Moscow for the first time, but I didn't get a chance to look too much into that. Unless I see a international or national story there, it affects every man, woman, and child, I typically don't go into the Long Island serial killer. When I saw the Epstein connections, I said, wait a minute, I got to do this. But normally I wouldn't do just murder by itself.
Right. Well, you got to keep on flowing on your path, and you might notice something and just keep on going. But if you need to, do a side route and do a little
I definitely did with LISK. I definitely thought there was a national security op going on.
I followed Field back in the day. Love how everything is coming full circle. Great work, George and co. Virginia Mac. Thanks, Virginia. Awesome stuff. All right, I think we'll leave it right there, George. Great to see you in Seattle on the move, and we will probably be doing Saturday night. I think our schedule for now is going to be Wednesday. Wednesdays, we're a little later than usual here this Wednesday. Probably go back to 11 a.m. next week, Wednesday, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. or 8 a.m. Pacifics. And then Saturday Night Live. We've started a Saturday Night Live show.
Woo!
So keep that going if we can.
Yeah.
And thanks. Well, I don't think Tara will be here in studio, but for folks who want to be part of this, be part of doing a show, maybe even be live with George on a Wednesday or Saturday, you can come here to 8015 Summerfield, Lambertville, Michigan, and sit in this seat. Our great friend Mark is over there. Mark yielded the seat today to Tara because Tara's here. So, Mark's always happy to yield the co-host seat to anybody, Mark. And we'll get more co-host seats going. We'll get a whole round table and pull the camera back.
And in August, we want to have people come in, and we want to do the citizen journalism seminars in August. So we'll fill up 1 week. If that fills up, we'll do 2 weeks. If it fills up, we'll do 3 weeks. Aaron will have pricing information. If you're an alumni cast member, that you get it come for free. So let's do it.
Citizen journalism boot camp.
Exactly. We got a lot to move forward.
We'll run you through StreamYard. We'll run you how to do your own show if you want to do a show. AI training. I mean, it'll be a whole week long just dive in of being a citizen journalist and being with us and George and everything. So look forward to that in the summer if you got time this summer. More news about that.
How to publish a book. We can make your own book there. You can print my books there. It'll be a great week. It'll be a great publishing week.
Straw man birth. So David Lester Strait exposed the citizen sovereignty and autonomy associated with the straw man birth certificate, ISS with bonds on birth certificates.
Okay, fascinating.
Yeah, so see, that's good stuff. That's important stuff. So George, thanks for reporting from the West Coast. I know there's a lot of stuff going on out there, so we'll check in with you soon.
All right,
Okay,
folks.
bye-bye, you guys. Thanks a
There you
lot.
have it.
Travels.
And you
Bye,
can, of
George.
course, always support George on his Substack and at buymeacoffee.com. And we'll see y'all coming soon. Thanks a lot. Please consider supporting George Webb at substack.com for $8 a month.
Thanks, George, for all your good work.